I know that you've been following it pretty closely here. We know Luigi Mangione pleaded not guilty now, of course. This is to the state charges. Walk us through a little bit sort of the thinking behind this, but also what this is going to mean now for the defense, considering, of course, there's quite a bit of evidence against him.
Well, the defense, I think it is very typical in the first court appearance for the defendant to plead not guilty and to later resolve the case with some kind of plea agreement and disposition. I don't know whether that will happen here, but there's no real news in the fact that the man pleaded guilty. There does seem to be very strong evidence that he is the person who pulled the trigger. He may try to put on, at some point in the process, evidence of a mental defect or mental problem, but I think an insanity defense is going to be very, very hard for him to mount in this case. It may be more of an argument he can make it in mitigation at the time of his sentence, his mental problems. Mm-hmm. So he has a very tough case to try.
Yeah, and with that not guilty plea as well, I mean, do you get a sense then of what the defense's strategy could be? You know who the lawyers are representing Mangione.
I do, and he has a superb lawyer. Karen Friedman Agnifilo has a wonderful reputation, is very well known in town. I'm sure she'll do everything that can be done for him. And I happen to agree with some of what she had to say about the case in terms of, the mayor showing up when an extradited defendant is brought to the state. That's ridiculous. I mean, and that illustrates one of the big issues in this case is it is so notorious that everything gets stretched and bent and is treated in an out of proportion way. And that's a perfect example of the way that publicity like this can really warp what is an ordinary criminal case in some respects.
Why do you think there is so much being put on that case? The number of officers that he has around him, as you mentioned, the mayor being involved, the defense, of course, coming forward and saying you're parading him around like a political pawn. What do you think the strategy is there?
Everybody wants to be famous, right? I mean, this is a case where it appears, at least initially, that the evidence is pretty overwhelming. Not clear that there's a strong defense to be made. And somebody like Eric Adams and police officers, everybody wants to be associated with a big victory in a high-profile case. And it's looking right now like a layup for the prosecution, so everybody wants to be on screen.
We've got Sorry, go ahead, Roland.
It's a little distasteful, frankly. Yeah. I've had several high-profile cases where I was spat on going in and out of the courthouse and things like that. And it just shouldn't be that way, but it is what it is.
With that being said, there's 11 state charges. We know there as well, he's going to have his extradition back to New York, where he's going to be facing additional federal charges on this. He could be facing the death penalty on that. With all that we've seen so far, a lot of questions in terms of how both of these cases are going to work, whether they're going to work simultaneously or not. We know that in terms of the state charges, he's back in court in February. We don't know about the federal charges, but or in terms of when that federal trial will begin. Can you kind of walk us through, if you can, in brief, how all of that is going to work both on both sides here? Because this is going to be a massive case, if not two cases that are working together side by side.
Yes, and I will say at the outset, Ms. Seth, that the fact that there is a federal case is, I think, in many respects, a function of the fact that this is such a notorious case. In a less notorious murder case, the federal government wouldn't bother bringing charges, but here there's a chance to get publicity by doing so, and they've done it. This is a murder case, a plain, straightforward murder case. The state court case, the one in state court, will dominate the proceedings in the long term. The federal government and its prosecutors will get their moment in the sun now when Mr. Mangione is arraigned federally, but they'll step to the back. They'll allow the state court to proceed. Very likely, Mr. Mangione will be convicted in the state court, and after that, the federal case will be worked out and resolved and drift away. the main action here is going to be the state case, and there is only a federal case because of the notorious nature of the murder.
Well, we're going to be watching developments pretty closely. Roland, it's good to have you on this, get your expertise indeed. Roland Riopelle joining us, former U.S. federal prosecutor joining us from New York. Roland, thank you again for this.
Pleasure to be with you.